All right, you ready, buddy?
Yep, as ready as I'll ever be.
All right, Layla will be proud of you. It's witchcraft.
Spooky.
Welcome, everyone, to a very special edition of the Stoned Witches Hour. We have a very special guest, and we miss Layla very much. It seems like last time I was the one that was gone, and now this time Layla is the one that's gone. So, Layla, if you're out there, we miss you, and we can't wait for you to get back. So, today we actually have two East Coast folks. Last week, you were treated to Layla and Lisa Ann and had two West Coast folks. So today we're going to have two East Coast folks. This is so amazing. My son is here with us today, and I would actually like to welcome my son Gavin is going to chat with us about some experiences. Poor Gavin has had to grow up dealing with me, and for everybody out there, yeah, he's laughing, and you probably all are too. You've all been listening to me. I'm the crazy one. Layla's the sane one, and this poor child has had to deal with me and in my ghosty witchy stuff. And he knows rule number one: do not touch mommy's Ouija board.
Yeah, unlike some other children of yours.
Exactly. So, Gavin, why don't you say hi to everybody? And also, I want to point out to folks, Gavin has a gaming YouTube channel. Tell us about your gaming YouTube channel and give a shout out to your channel. Yeah. Who are you? Tell us who you are. We don't know who you are. Tell us.
Hi, I'm Gavin. Like Chelle said, that I am her son, her only son, her best son.
You're my only son. How could you not be my best son? What the heck?
I was gonna say the best child, but I thought that'd be too mean. But yeah, I play a lot of Pokemon, which is ironic because Layla, I know she plays Go quite frequently, so she'd be the one with me to hype up Pokemon.
Can I
But
just can I just say, folks, that I do not condone my almost 25-year-old son in his Pokemon addiction. Okay, Gavin, continue.
hey, to be fair, playing these games is what has made me find my current partner. So yeah, so that's one thing. But
Blah blah and your love stories. Find a room. Get a room.
so what I usually do, it's in Pokemon, there are different colored versions of the Pokemon called shinies, and I basically just find shinies all the time.
I feel like I have funded those adventures, but yet I don't know what any of it means. You're just like, give me money, mom. And I'm like, yeah, whatever.
There's actually something Pokemon related that is actually something I feel like you would enjoy, Mom. The newest generation is coming out. I know you don't know, and probably a lot of the people at home don't know what that means. It means that more of these things are coming out. And one of them is very popular because is a cat, and everyone likes cats, including you. You have a couple.
Who could not love a kitty?
Well, one of these cat Pokemon got a pretty interesting nickname online. It's a grass type, so people are calling it Weed Cat.
Ooh. Ooh, I'll have to
Yeah.
tell Layla. Layla would love that.
And it's funny because it looks like it has a big pot leaf on its face.
Speaking of weed, today, folks, Layla's not here, and it's tragic, and I'm sad. And I will admit that I am high, but again, adult child, nothing bad here. We're not even in the same state. We're not even in the same location, but he is an adult.
Yeah.
We're not going to be super weed heavy today because it's kind of awkward for Chelle to be weeding with her boy. So, we're going to talk about his game. We're going to tell some funky us stories, stuff
Yeah.
that we've done, stuff that Gavin has done. Gavin is currently living in Connecticut, next to Massachusetts, but
Yeah.
just like me, the poor kid travels to New York so much. So Gavin is reporting from upstate New York today.
Yeah.
It's great. And I just want to say a shout out to our friends, Storytime with Tom and Mike. Tom and Mike, if you are listening tonight, and I hope you guys are, because you guys rock, and we haven't shouted you out in a while, Story Time with Tom and Mike. Check out their podcast. You guys would love my son's gaming channel. Check it out. Gavin, tell us what your gaming channel is.
It's called Shino Raikou. Raikou is the name of a tiger Pokemon. So tigers are one of my favorite animals. But yeah, it's Shino Raikou.
Okay. And we'll have a link up for that in our description-y thing, whatever Laylla calls it. She knows what it's called. I know where it goes and how it all works. I just don't know the words.
I like the fun, entertaining one, and Layla's the one that does all the hard work.
Layla's fun and entertaining.
Well, yeah, but as your son, I am legally obligated to give you more props.
All right, folks. I do hard work. It's Laylla and I both work very hard. She's just more editing savvy than I am.
Yeah, Layla's great.
You know, like I had said, Gavin is now in Connecticut, and Connecticut is almost, see, I feel like Massachusetts is like somehow the spookiest place all of a sudden, but Connecticut is a close second.
Yeah.
We're going to talk a little bit today about some stories Gavin has from Connecticut. We're going to talk about some stories from our hometown in upstate New York and some shared stories that Gavin and I have experienced together. So, Gavin, I'm actually going to let you start. Laylla always has me start, and I'm always like, why do I have to start? Layla's always the one who makes me start. So we're gonna kick off with Gavin's story. Now,
nice.
Tell us, first of all, where, what roughly city and town, if you happen to know that, in Connecticut where you were, and then tell us the location where you were before you get started.
So I've grown up in upstate New York like you, and
I hope so. I'm your mother.
Well, yeah, but you don't live there anymore. But about a month, but about a year after she moved to where she is, I moved to, it's a town called Tallinn, Connecticut. It is very, very small.
It reminds me of upstate New York, folks. Very wooded, very little, very country.
Well, I told you this, the area we lived in, upstate New York, is actually larger than the entire state of Connecticut.
Most things are. We love you, Connecticut listeners.
Yeah, it's so tiny, but I love living there. It's such a great time over there.
All right, tell us your story.
Okay, so this is the Daniel Benton Homestead from Tallinn, New York.
Tallinn, Connecticut, silly.
Sorry. I'm in New York. I've grown up in New York for over 20 years. It is hard to break that habit of saying New York. Well, this Connecticut home was in the Benton family from the time Daniel Benton built it in 1720 till about 1930.
So it was in their family from what, 1720 to 1930?
Yeah, so about 200 years.
Wow.
In 1970, it was opened as a museum where they teach about 18th century life, as well as telling the story of the first three generations of Bentons. And this is kind of where that story originates, is from the third generation of Benton specifically.
Now, I'd like to point out that you've actually taken me here when I went and visited you, and we actually went and went to this house. For folks that aren't aware of like what some of these 1700s homesteads looked like, these are small, people.
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't you say, Gavin, it might be only like maybe 30 feet long by maybe 15, 20 feet wide?
Yeah, I'd say that's about right.
I mean, these are small houses. So for that, something like that to stay generational for 200 years, you're definitely talking about small, cramped quarters. This isn't like any big, luxurious mansion by any stretch. One of those, what do they call them? Not twig houses, board houses, slab houses. I don't know. Laylla would know. Laylla, we need you. Where they're just like thin, long pieces of wood that are kind of like the outside. I don't know how to explain it. Old 1700 houses, people. New England. Google New England houses and what they looked like in the 1700s, and you'll totally get what I'm saying. Okay, continue, Gav.
And what's really cool, too, is this house has a lot of the original stuff still in it. even though it's been in this family for over 200 years, is pretty much untouched besides probably the light system that was built into the house. Pretty much everything else is the same as it was.
So like Layla and I have talked about multiple times, you're going to get that residual energy, that residual vibe.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, keep going.
The Bentons were a family of military men and a pretty well-off family in Holland. Daniel's sons fought in the French and Indian War, and then when the time came, Daniel's grandsons fought in the Revolutionary War. One of Daniel's grandsons, Elijah, dated a girl by the name of Jemima Barrows, and his family did not approve of their relationship. See, Jemima was a daughter of a cabinet maker, and because she wasn't rich, they didn't like her.
You know what? I'd let you make it. I'd let you be with a cabinet maker. I'd be totally okay if you were with a cabinet maker's child.
Yeah, you'd think that they'd have lovely furniture, but apparently mixing of the classes was really not something that was approved of.
It was frowned upon back there. It was very frowned upon. You had to stay with your class back then.
Yeah, definitely. Nonetheless, Elijah promised to return from war to reunite with her once he got back. And Elijah and his two brothers went and fought in the Battle of Long Island. It was one of the first major battles of the Revolutionary War. But unfortunately, the British went on and won that battle, captured the Benton siblings, and put them on British prison ships. Unlike today, because King George proclaimed the colonists as traitors, instead of being treated as prisoners of war, they were actually treated as prisoners in general. And essentially, instead of treating them like you're supposed to with captured enemy soldiers, basically, this king neglected them to death on these ships. No food, barely any space. Pretty much either died of smallpox or died of neglect, really.
King George did that?
Yeah.
Geez, and I'm such a fan of the English monarchy. That's pretty shitty, though.
And the crazy thing, too, is usually for treason, which is what these colonists would have been charged with, they would have just been hung and killed. But because the British were losing public favor in the colonies, they decided to basically hide away these soldiers and kill them on these ships, essentially.
You know, I'd rather have been hung. You know, if you're just going to kill me, get that shit over with and be done with it. Don't torture my ass and make me starve. Although I am a little chunky, so, you know, I could probably last a while.
I'm not saying anything. But anyway, ironically enough, while the Bentons were imprisoned on these ships, the Benton Homestead was actually used to hold captured English and German soldiers who were being transported to Boston.
Oh, so that's the first sign of some bad juju, because, I mean, again, folks, this is a relatively, if I were to put it in terms today, max 4 people living there comfortably, max. So if they use that as like a transitional medical place, people obviously would have died there, would be my guess, because I can't imagine that revolutionary medicine was top notch.
No, it wasn't.
So I would imagine that kind of is going to lay the foundation for some bad shit.
Might come up again.
But we could safe to say that we know for sure the bad shit started happening during the Revolutionary War, correct?
Well, I talk about this later. Because it was in the family for so long, some stuff could have happened during that time, but because they probably didn't want to share it, it hasn't been shared.
Why? We share our creepy experiences, Gav. Here we are today.
Well, we're not the most reserved people in the world, Mom.
Folks, this is a family affair. You know, I've tortured both of my children their whole lives. You know, I'm that mom that's screaming out the car window on the way home from baseball practice. Look at the moon, kids. And I'm also the first one that says, hey, kids, you want to go look for ghosts? It's okay. Mommy will protect you. You know, I am that parent. And, you know, you grew up fine. You're fine. You're good. I didn't traumatize you too much, did I?
Not too much.
And you know ghosts are real and you don't freak out, right? You're good, right?
Yeah, pretty well off.
You know, I mean, but But we'll get to it in a minute, guys. When we get to our experience Gavin and I had together, you're going to be like, whoa, ho, 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 because this is a good one. I don't know how, Layla always says I'm the one who comes up with the crazy adventure ideas. I didn't even have to come up with this one. This was like me and my kids just doing our due and stuff happens. So yeah, continue. Gavin, Daniel Benton House.
So unfortunately, both of Elijah's brothers did die on these ships, and Elijah himself contracted smallpox before he was released due to a prisoner exchange and was sent home. So when Jemima found out that Elijah was alive, she asked the family if she could take care of him and quarantine with them as well, and the rest of the family.
Wow, that sounds like current times. Deja vu.
Yeah, and speaking of current times, studies say that COVID is supposed to kill about 0.5 to 1% of people who catch it. This is smallpox, and it killed about 15% of people who got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so imagine that.
They're small, but they're poxy.
So, despite being taken care of Jemima, who was contracting the disease while she was taking care of him, Elijah dies just weeks after he returned home around January 21st of 1777. And after he died, Jemima contracted smallpox and died a month later with practically no care because she was the only one to take care of him.
They didn't have no kids?
No.
That's why I had kids take care of me when I'm old. Right, Gav?
Yeah, but he had to go to war. And then once he got back, he had smallpox. There was no time to raise children.
True. I would make a comment if Layla had said that, but folks, you know how I make these offhand, sometimes vulgar comments, but it's my boy. I can't do it. Okay, continue on.
You act like I haven't listened to almost every single episode of your podcast.
That's why we love you, Gavin. See, folks, you ever going to do a podcast, get at least one of your kids to listen. Okay, keep going. Daniel Benton House.
Because Jemima and Elijah were not married, even though they weren't married, the Bettons allowed Jemima to be buried on the property. However, because they weren't married, they couldn't be buried side by side. She was buried about 40 feet away from the man she loved, essentially.
That's shitty, and that's a bummer.
Yeah. But I mean, I don't know what's worse, not having her be buried on the property or having her being buried on the property, but far away from him. Like, I don't know which one's worse.
Well, unfortunately, there was a lot of various types of discrimination going on in that time period, and this is just another example of that.
Exactly. But like I said before, because this home was in this family's possession for so long, we don't quite know how many paranormal things have happened there. But once this house was starting to be rent out to people, this is where we get the start to some crazy stories.
You know I love crazy stories. Woo! So give us a year. Give us a starting point of shit getting real.
So this was in between the Bettons selling this house and it becoming a museum. So it would be roughly 30s, 40s, or 50s. This one doesn't really have a date. The next one was in the 80s.
You're talking 1900s, correct?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
So more towards current time than the story happened.
I got you. I understand. Keep going.
So one night when the house was rented to a couple, the couple were laying in bed and the woman saw a man standing at the foot of their bed.
Honestly, that has happened to me. And,
yeah,
that's crazy shit.
That's when you cover yourself in the blankets.
Well, as I've stated in previous episodes, that is having a ghost appear at the end of my bed as a 10-year-old kid is why I cannot sleep as a mid to late 40-year-old with my feet uncovered. I could sleep totally uncovered except for my feet.
Well, the blanket didn't help this woman. He supposedly walked up and put his hand over her mouth.
Wait. Back the trolley up, boy. So present-ish day, we'll call it the 80s or so,
Yeah.
obviously not the 16 or 1700s. So, within the last 40 or so years, someone was there
Hmm.
renting this house and a ghost covered her mouth.
Yeah.
I would shit myself. And you know me well enough to know I'd stay, but I'd shit myself. I wouldn't leave, but I'd shit. Holy Christ. Okay, keep going.
He supposedly disappeared once she pushed him away. And as you could probably guess the twist of the story, her husband was sleeping right next to her. So this
That's
man,
always the way. That is always
yeah,
the way. Always.
yeah. So this man was not her husband because her husband was sleeping right next to her.
Been there, done that. Got freaked out.
So this next story of some spooky happenings at this house happened in the 80s.
Okay.
A woman by the name of Stephanie had a college assignment and basically had to stay the night to do some research.
Like related to the ghost stuff or just related to the Daniel Benton house in general?
Yeah, I would assume it'd be more of how like the daily life of someone from that time.
Gotcha.
So like how they kept themselves warm, stuff like that.
Cooking with the cauldron.
The whole time she reported feeling like suffocated and had like weight on her when she was in the house, mostly when she went upstairs.
That's your sign that you are not wanted there. Okay. Just putting that out there. Keep going.
Yeah. She heard men's voices coming from the basement, and her friend was not a man who was with her that night. So it was probably the voices of those, like you said, the residual captured soldiers from the British and the Germans.
Right. Did they ever report hearing any of these apparition voices speaking German?
I don't know if she knew enough German to identify it. And
Yeah,
even
but you
then,
know what I mean. You can identify, I don't know German, but if someone was speaking a language that wasn't English, I could say, well, I don't know if it was German, but it surely wasn't English.
yeah, she knew it wasn't English, but she
Okay.
heard men's voices.
Okay. Again, I would stay as I'm freaking out.
And the most notable moment from her night was when she saw a figure. She described it as the figure was looking at her from the doorway. So she was like in the middle of a room and she saw a figure in the doorway looking straight at her.
Man or woman, or couldn't she tell?
I believe she described it as a woman.
So that was probably Jemima.
Yeah, yeah. And multiple people have reported seeing womanly figure. Some say, I believe this was in another one of the episodes here where we like a dress. Some people say it's a wedding dress. Some people say it's like a colonial dress, but I believe you said like
that white flowy dress
yeah,
type
yeah,
look. That white ghosty dress look.
yeah. And staff and even visitors have reported same thing as Stephanie, heavy and suffocating feeling, mostly of sadness and grief around the house and especially near Jemima's grave. And even sounds of a woman weeping have been heard. And again, a lot of people have seen a figure of a woman wearing a dress.
Now, how far away is the familial cemetery from the actual structure of the house?
I don't know exactly how far, but it's on property.
So, I mean, it's, I'm not asking for feet, like 20 feet away, but like it's out in your yard kind of thing.
Yeah, it wasn't like down the road.
Okay. Oh, Jesus. So they have a cemetery in their freaking yard? No wonder there's shit there. The hell? Like, who does that? Like, oh, let me just go like bury Aunt Susie in the freaking backyard next to my poor passed on cat. Like, wow. Yeah, no, bad juju.
And then we're going to separate her from her lover about 40, 50 feet away, make him mad.
That's one of those. I don't like saying bad words around Gavin. Ha 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 ha. But that's like a fuck around and find out moment. Like
D-
truly. Like fuck around and
Definitely.
find out, people.
Well, I mean, this was the 1700s, so they didn't really
Your
know.
land was your land, and you lived and died and were buried on your land. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's crazy to think for us today, but it's probably a very common thing back then.
Now, has there been any more public experiences since the girl from college?
Not generally. A lot of the like visitors experiences are more common, more I should say more recent, but they're not as like big as like say Stephanie's who was there overnight, which was probably the worst time of the day to be there. But they are actually starting up their tour soon. So I was thinking of maybe having you come
It's a
down and
date. You don't even have to
yeah.
finish the sentence. It's a date. Let me ask you this.
Yeah,
Is it just like a day tour, or do they still rent it overnight?
mostly just day tours.
Do they have anything at night? Do you know?
I'm not sure. Their website isn't the greatest, but I think I saw something about night tours, which if they do provide them, I would love to do a night tour.
Because I know that when you took me down there, what was it, last fall, I believe,
Yeah.
you took me down there and it was closed and we didn't want to trespass because, as a reminder, folks, trespassing is illegal. I condone a lot of crazy adventures, but I will not illegally trespass with my children. So we
Yeah.
just kind of stood out on the road and took pictures and stuff. We didn't approach the house. So I wasn't sure if that was still an option to do something at night there, even if it wasn't overnight. But I am down for looking for some revolutionary ghosts. And I'm always down to rope my poor children into it too. So yeah, you need to look into that and get back to me.
Oh yeah, definitely. Maybe when Layla's back, we could do a an update video or update podcast.
Have you had a chance to go inside this yet?
No, not yet. You know, our summer was pretty busy last year, as you are aware of. So we were not able to go last year. So my experience with the house is the same as yours, where we really just drove past it.
I don't know. Layla is so technical. I wish she was here, could answer this, because I actually have some very eerie photographs of this location. I will see if I can have Layla attach them in our description, folks, because I didn't take a lot of pictures there, but we were there about dusk-ish. And just the couple of photographs I snapped, you look at them and you get that eerie sense from them. This is definitely a place where you can tell when you pull up out front that there is some sort of activity. You might not know what that activity is until you kind of entrench yourself in it, but you can tell that there's something going on there. And I'd love to go back and kind of explore and go through the inside of the house legally, of course,
Yeah,
because, A, I don't do anything trespassy with my kids. B, I don't like to do anything trespassy anyway, but ghosts are ghosts. And C, we don't want to be disrespectful of private property and museum property and people's, graves and all of that.
absolutely.
I do want to look into seeing if that's a location that we might be able to physically check it out. Do you want to check it out? Let's check it out,
Oh
people.
yeah, we should definitely, especially since most of the like kind of ghost hunty videos about this place are a little more on the older side, a little more on the lower quality side. I think there's one from like 2002.
Is that a challenge for us to go and do some high quality video investigating? I think that's a challenge.
We should.
Layla's usually the rational one who gives me 1,000 reasons why it would be best not to do that, Chelle. And I'm like, come on.
Layla's not here.
How scary could it be? Come on.
People go to this museum all the time, so of course it's safe.
I'll go ghost hunting even in the dead of night, but I will not go swimming in the ocean off Cape Cod. There's jaws there, man.
Yeah,
It shows you my priorities. I've actually told our listeners one time, Gav, I told them that you were the kid that would go ghost hunting with me.
absolutely.
You were also the kid that would stand at the bottom of the roller coaster with me because neither of us would go on.
Yeah,
I still live by my theory that I have a kid that isn't afraid of roller coasters and no fear of plunging to her death, but the thought of a ghost will make her cry on a dime. And then I have another child that the thought of going on a roller coaster would make him cry on a dime, and he will go ghost hunting with mommy 24/7.
yeah, absolutely.
You rock, Gavin. You rock.
I know, like you always say, it's hard to wake up this awesome.
It is very hard. So, I'm going to talk a little bit about a house you're very familiar with,
Hmm.
and I'll get to some pre you being born stuff.
Ooh,
Then we can both talk about our shared experience at this place. So we're gonna, Gavin was talking about Connecticut, spooky state, lots of stuff there. Layla always says the West Coast is the best coast, but like there's so many things going on in northeastern states, even in the southeastern states. I mean, I just feel like the East Coast is one big spook fest.
yeah.
We're gonna go back to where we're from, Gav, where you are currently recording from in upstate New York. We're gonna talk about your grandmother's house. How about that?
Spooky.
Now, I don't have like the abstract of the house on me, so some of my dates might be off a little bit, but I grew up in this house. My parents purchased this house literally 3 weeks before I was born. So for the sake of we're not talking numbers here, we'll just say that this house was purchased by my parents in the mid 70s. This house dates back to around 1875. It was one of the first houses in the small little town that it's in. It's not even really a town. It's like would you call it a town, Gav? Like a town, a suburb of the bigger city, a town of the city?
Yeah, I'd say a suburb would probably be the best description.
Yeah. They have their own fire department. Does that constitute for a town, I guess? I don't know. We'll go with
I
Gavin's
don't know.
suburb of a small upstate New York City. We'll call it, the late 1800s. This house was built in, at the time, kind of like a farming area. Anybody familiar with upstate New York? Corn for days, people. Corn for days. And originally, this house was built as a boarding house. One of the townspeople that was rather loaded with cash had a single daughter, only child, single woman, and he bought her this property and built this boarding house for her. That was kind of how she made her income, how she lived her life. She lived in this house and had boarding people in, and as kind of the town was built up around it, she would board the workers. Anybody familiar with aviation, avionics, and kind of military manufacturing? There was a Singer Link. They created the first flight simulators that is in this area. There was a military National Guard reserve there back in like the 60s or so. 50s and 60s was actually a medical military base. Agriculture, things of that nature. There was a railroad right there. So as you can imagine, she had all these borders. She had this house until, I believe, she had it from around 1875 until like maybe 1930-ish. Single the whole time. This house was her everything. She lived there. It was her job. It was her everything. So she had always had tenants. And it makes me laugh. And Gavin, when you think about it, it kind of should make you laugh too.
Yeah.
Can you imagine grandma's house as a boarding house? Like when I think of a boarding house, I'm thinking huge.
Yeah.
Just to think of grandma's house as a boarding house just throws my mind.
Yeah, because it feels like I feel like it could maybe comfortably fit 10 max. So it's
Yeah.
very weird.
I mean, we ain't talking like the Hilton Hotel here, people. My mother's house is like a normal house, in my opinion. But anyway, back then it was a boarding house, apparently. Big stuff. Kind of to paint the picture for you. It's one of those like big square houses, big first floor, big second floor. full-size attic, full basement, and it's in the shape of a square. I don't know how else to describe it. So yeah, boarding house. As you can imagine, she got this when she was 18 as a gift from her father and lived there and was running the boarding house until she died at a significantly old age. As a matter of fact, she died in the house. Gavin, just to kind of freak you out a little bit, she actually died in grandma's laundry room.
Oh my God.
Anywho, yeah, right. Anyway, so, someone else had this house, and I'll get to her in a minute. So the original owner passed away. She sold the house, her estate sold the house to another single woman who again turned it into a boarding house. So second single female owner, second boarding house business. Here we are. This woman lived until about the late 60s. Again, she boarded people from the military base in the Singerlink business. She died in the house as well. We'll call it the late 60s. No one lived in the house from the late 60s until the mid 70s when my parents bought it. The house was untouched.
That's wild.
Yeah, right? Isn't this wild, Gavin?
It's weird to hear of this like history of a house that I've been to many, many, many times that I didn't really know about. And it's just weird that it was vacant for so many years before they bought it.
So mid 70s, my parents buy this house and they do not want it to be a boarding house. Thank you. It's a single family home. Growing up, I would always hear, my mother talk about the lady upstairs. I don't want to hear about the goddamn lady upstairs, Mom. My bedroom's upstairs. Now, when I was growing up, there's this back room on the second floor, and it was actually a bedroom during my childhood, but it is now present day, currently the laundry room. And that is where the original owner died. That was her bedroom. Ironically enough, the second woman also died in the same room, and that was also her bedroom. So we got these two women die in the same room, both own the house. That was their bedroom. Now you know why I don't want to go in the laundry room at my mother's. Now, as my life would have it, my bedroom was right next to this room. I would literally, as a child, run straight across the hall to the bathroom because I always felt like there was something at the end of that hallway. There would be times I would see a woman standing in the doorway to the present day laundry room. As a kid, I'd be like, Mom, there's a woman upstairs. And she'd be like, is she in the doorway of this room? And I'd be like, yeah. And she'd be like, oh, what was her name, Gavin? Do you remember?
I want to say it's like, I don't know if you've described her hair as like that beehive. So maybe I'm thinking Beatrice because of that.
No, it was like Cora, something like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
So my mother would be like, oh, that's so-and-so. This used to be her house. And I'd be like, what? My parents just, and it's so funny because my parents are like the most don't believe in this stuff people, truly. Gavin is my witness. Like my mother thinks that this is a crock of crap as she will talk about the ghost on her second floor. Like I can't even explain her rationality with this. So growing up, it was always, oh yeah, she's there. Don't know what to tell you. And I am freaked out, crazy, like running in the bathroom in the middle of the night so I didn't have to look, or I'd like close my eyes and run so I wouldn't see her. So I kind of grew up with this lady next to my bedroom. It kind of became normal for me. And I'm not saying that I liked it any less. A couple of times, and Gavin will remember this, I had a house down the road from my mother's house for several years. And my washer broke, and I would go to my mother's and do the laundry. And I'd go late at night when no one was home. And me and both of my children would argue on who was going to go inside grandma's house and do the laundry because we were all too scared to go in that laundry room alone in the dark. Here I am trying to force my teenage children to go into their grandma's haunted freaking laundry room. Remember that, Gav?
I do.
I'm not going. You go. Like
I always use the excuse I didn't know how to do laundry.
Yeah, well. So, it's just everyone in my family just always kind of knew that there was something at the end of the hallway. As unsettling as it was also half normal. So we're going to fast forward a little bit from some of my run-ins with her, I guess we'll call them, to a day. And like I said, I had owned a house down the street from my mother, and I had to take my kids somewhere. Me, my daughter, Gavin, my beautiful favorite son. By the way, I only have one son. You're still my favorite, buddy.
No, thank you. I know.
My mother happens to have a gas station across from her house. We were not doing anything at my mother's house. We weren't going there. My mother actually winters in a different state. My mother was not even at the house. The house was locked up for the winter. No one there. Nobody there. Actually, if I remember correctly, she had been gone a few months and no one had been in the house for months. And at the time, only myself and my brother had a key, just kind of setting the scene here.
Yeah.
Me and my kids have to go somewhere and I had to stop and get gas. And so obviously living down the street, I would stop and get gas across from my mother's. I just remember I had to send one kid. You might remember, Gavin. I had to send one kid into the gas station to pay. Might have been my daughter.
Yeah.
And then I was standing at the pump, doing what you do, getting ready, undoing my gas cap. And whichever kid was still in the car, it might have been you, Gavin,
I think so. Yeah.
said, "There's somebody at grandma's." And I was like, "Grandma's down south. There's nobody at grandma's." And I remember you said, "No, look at grandma's attic window. There's a woman in grandma's attic window." And you and me and your sister look up, and all three of us saw a woman in grandma's attic window on the third floor. And then all three of us saw nothing in that window. And we weren't at the house. My brother was not at the house. And at the time, my brother was the only other person who had access and a key. There was no one in that house, and we knew no one was at that house. We were staring at it. The people who lived there before us were.
I remember you said this story. I think it was in passing in a previous episode. And weirdly enough, this is like listening to you and Layla talk. That's how I kind of unwind after a day. So like here I am, my partner's sleeping, I'm laying in bed and relaxed, covering up myself up in a blanket, listening to my mom's podcast, and all of a sudden you tell that story, and I forgot about this for years until you said something on this show, and it creeped me out so bad.
Why, Gavin? Tell us, why did it creep you out?
Because it was something so surreal that happened to us, and I can't believe like I ever forgot it. The second I was reminded to it, and the second you told that story, it was like it brought me back to that exact moment.
What would you have guessed? That you were somewhere between like maybe 15 and 18 when that happened, 16 and 18 years old when that happened? I mean,
Yeah.
you weren't like a 5-year-old kid thinking they saw a shadow in grandma's window. Like you were
No.
like in 10th or 11th grade. You were a high schooler. You were freaked out.
Yeah.
I do remember that when we all agreed that we all saw it, and we all agreed that it all disappeared, and then we all agreed it was grandma's ghost. I feel like I remember us getting in the car and getting away from that freaking gas station in grandma's house as fast as we could.
Yeah, we peeled out that gas station.
And, I grew up in that house. I spent my whole life in that house. In the same respect, everybody has their childhood home and they love it and can't live without it. I love my childhood home. It's my childhood home. I mean, I know every inch of that. If it was ever for sale and I could buy it and go back, I would. But I'm not a fan of being alone in my mother's house because I know I'm not alone. And you know it too, Gavin. You're not alone
Yeah.
with grandma's. Even when grandma's not there, you're not alone, man.
I remember when I was little, especially, I felt such a weird vibe. I think it was before I knew about this whole story. I was so creeped out upstairs to a point where I would sleep in grandma's recliner in the living room and I would stay over.
And that's the thing, it's not a whole house thing. It's not everywhere in the house. It's the whole second floor. Like,
Yeah.
I don't feel that in the first floor. I don't really feel it in the basement or the attic. But that second floor, all the homeowners, they're all still living in the back bedroom, for God's sakes.
Mm-hmm.
But, again, not that anything tragic per se happened there. I mean, yeah, they both died, but, a natural causes thing. It's not like they were murdered or anything. They had spent their everything, their heart and soul in making it a boarding house. That was their work. That was their home. Everything they did was on that property and for that property. They just never left their bedrooms. It's like that. You die in bed and you wake up the next day and keep on keeping on. And like both of these women died in that bedroom and never left. I think they both feel, and when I was old enough for grandma to tell me the story of this, it almost seemed like they were treating us, these ghosts, these two women were treating us like we were their tenants,
Yeah.
like we were their boarders, and like they were still, what do you call it? The renter, the boarder, what do you call it?
Yeah. Boarder, renter. I don't know.
The person who runs a boarding house.
Yeah.
So it really, I think, was more of a, I mean, they never did anything. I never had anything bad happen. I don't think you did you?
No, just creepy vibes.
And seeing, like, I remember many times my whole life just seeing the shape of a woman with dark hair at the end of that damn hallway. I just think that they're not angry. They're not, mean in any way. They don't do anything nutty. I just don't think they realize they're dead, and they think that our whole family is their boarders.
Yeah, and especially now with like you said, grandma goes down south for the winter, so people aren't there as much anymore. So maybe when she is there, that kind of brings up a kind of new borders, new tenants coming in for them.
I got a great idea.
Yeah.
How about this winter when grandma's down south, we just park in her driveway and watch the windows and see if they look out at us again, like the time at the gas station.
Oh my God. We should.
I don't know if you remember me saying this at the time, but I remember at the time saying, were they just looking out the window in general, or were they looking at us?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, were they looking at us or just out the window?
Yeah, almost like they sense.
Like, if they were looking out the window, great, you were looking out the window and I saw you, but were they looking at us? Because your sister is a lot more skeptical. Well, not as much now because she's had some experiences, but out of the three of us, your sister's definitely the more skeptical one. And she was ready to just curl up into a ball and cry herself to death because she was like, Mom, who is that? I'm like, I can't remember the lady's name. Coral, something like that. And I was like, oh, that's grandma's ghost. And like, your sister was off the hook. And she was like 18 and she was off the hook.
Yeah.
So I always, every time I think back of that, I always wonder, were they looking out the window or were they looking at us?
Yeah. But like you said, we should definitely go back during the winter, see if we could see anything.
Go to your grandma. She's there now. Tell her you need a spare key for us to go ghost hunting this winter.
I'll definitely do it.
I know you might not have been there too terribly recently because grandma just got back and you're out of state, and I just happened to be in town when she came back. But like, I was just in that house a week or two ago. It's still the same. I had to go upstairs for something. You still get that upstairs vibe, which is different than the downstairs vibe. That will never change, I don't think. I think that's one of those, even if our family were to get rid of that house and sell it, whoever were to ever take that house over is still going to deal with the ladies in the second floor laundry room.
Yeah, definitely.
I honestly just don't think they know they're dead.
Yeah, that's what I would assume, especially with unfamiliar people not being in that house, that with like a normal ghost, maybe they'd be a little more annoyed. But I mean, for them, they had random people coming into their house all the time to, like you said, to board in this house. So I honestly think that maybe to them, we were the longtime boarders, and to us, they're just the spooky spirits on the second floor.
Pretty much. It was always like a friendly relationship, I guess.
Yeah.
So I wanna thank you, Gavin, for sitting in with Laylla today. As much as I have terribly missed Laylla here tonight on the Stoned Witches Hour, it was so much fun to hear your story from Connecticut and for us to kind of reminisce about grandma's house for a few minutes. Who would have thought when you were a little boy that you and your mom would be talking about the ghosts at your grandma's house on a podcast? But here we are. Here we are, my boy.
Here we are, and I hope I did Laylla justice as a special guest on her podcast, and it was really fun. I enjoyed it.
We will have you back anytime, Gav. Please tell us your gaming channel.
Yeah, that's Shino Raiko.
Spell that for us. Spell it for us old folk who play a little bit of games and don't know how to spell your Pokemon stuff.
So that's SHINORAIKOU.
And where can we find that?
YouTube.
YouTube. Shino Raiko on YouTube. If you are into Pokemon stuff, my son is the person for you, folks. So we're gonna call it a wrap, Gav.
Nice.
I am so glad that you and I were able to do this. And for all of our listeners out there, Laylla will be back next week. We'll be back to talking weed and getting high and smoking the goods. I'm sure all of our listeners can understand and respect the fact that I wasn't going to be doing a whole bunch of that with my boy. but yeah, so we will be back to the Chelle and Laylla show next week. It'll be great. I don't even know what we're going to talk about, to be honest. It's going to be a surprise for you. It's going to be a surprise for us. It'll be great. Yeah. And any parting words you want to say to our listeners, Gav?
I hope you enjoy my mom's podcast. I've been enjoying it ever since you showed us the episode 0 on Christmas Day, I believe it was, where we were opening presents. You're like, hey, listen to this thing Laylla and I are doing. And we're like, okay.
Isn't that what every parent does for their kids on Christmas Day? Merry Christmas, kids. Listen to your mother's podcast and your Auntie Laylla.
Yeah, and not gonna lie, I was a little skeptical at first, but it really has been an enjoyable listen the past couple of weeks, 21 weeks now.
Well, I'll keep watching your YouTube video game stuff, even though I remember when I used to call all the Pokemons Pikachu?
Yeah.
It used to drive you crazy. Used to drive you nuts. Do not judge me about Pokemon, okay? Do not judge me. Don't do it. So thanks, Gav. Love you. Glad you were able to come. To all of our listeners, we'll be back to our regularly programmed broadcast next week.
Yeah, I can't wait.
So it's a wrap. Or I said it's a wrap, but you know what it really is, Gavin?
What is it?
It's witchcraft.
It's witchcraft.
You are your mother's son.
I am.
Until next time, folks, stay high, stay spooky, and get back here next week. It'll be Chelle and Laylla all night.
Oh, geez.
All right, Gav, I will send this off to Laylla.
Thanks for listening to the Stoned Witches Hour with Chelle and Laylla. If you like what you heard, please rate us and consider giving us a review. It really helps the show out, and we'll definitely take a toke of the kindest bud in your honor.